And also, if any of you guys ever need to rewatch it, you guys can rewatch it. I don't know how to turn off the webcam. I don't like it because I keep moving and then it's like.
Is she recording?
Yeah. I don't know. It's fine. I don't know how to turn it off though. I don't know. All right, guys, focus, please. Okay, so for Unit 3, we're going to look at this example. Unit 3, we're only going to spend 1 day on review, okay? So for Unit 3, it was kind of a lot of stuff, but... There you go. I'll trade you. So for Unit 3, there was a lot of information. So I kind of took all of the information and I put it into one worksheet. So that's why you have, it's like double-sided, but it's all on one context problem, okay? So this context at the top goes for the whole worksheet. So let's kind of just look at it together and see what we have. I don't know what I just clicked, my bad. So it says a physician who has delivered babies for over 20 years claims that birth weights of babies tend to be higher than the birth weights of their next older siblings. In other words, a parent's second child tends to have a higher birth weight than the first child, and then the third child tends to have a higher birth weight than the second child, and so on. So each next baby is higher than the previous one, okay? So to verify the doctor's statement, her office assistant gets a random sample of mothers with at least 2 children from the hospital records, and then they record the birth weights of the first 2 children. So the scatter plot is representing the birth weights of the firstborn children and the secondborn children for 19 mothers, and they have them on the scatter plot here, okay? So for part A, it says to identify the explanatory and the response variable. So your variables are the second child and the firstborn child, the birth weights. You just have to determine which one is the response, which one is the explanatory. Question?
So for the graph, I'm kind of confused. So how would it work, like the first and the second child? How would it work, like in the line situation?
I don't know what you mean by the line situation.
Because if you have to like plot for like, say you need the second child, and you're trying to plot like how much the second child weighs, how like
so like
just do it on the like do it.
So if the first child weighed like 6 pounds, then the second child weighed like 6.2 pounds.
That's an odd way of doing it.
It's like your X, whatever your X was, and you get a Y. So the first child was like 6.1 pounds, then the second child was like 6 pounds, and so forth. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, your 2 variables are the birth weights of the first child and the birth weights of the second child. You just have to figure out which one is the response, which one is the explanatory, okay? And then in part B, it says to describe the association in context. Keyword right there, context. So if you remember, anytime you see those 3 words, describe the association, this is talking about the STDs, okay? What does STD stand for in statistics? Strength, type, and direction. Good. So then look at this scatter plot and then say, do you think that's strong, moderate, or weak? That's the strength. The type, is it linear or curved? And then direction, is it positive or is it negative? But this needs to be in context. So you would say the association between the birth weights of blank and blank is strong, linear, positive, or moderate, curved, and negative. Whatever you think it is, you just write it out, okay? All right, then for part C, it says that the regression analysis of the data resulted in the following outcome and the residual plot. So it gives you a computer output So this graph right here where it says outcome, it's talking about this, but this is the computer output. And then the residual plot is this plot down here, because that says residual. And then in part C, it's asking you to determine the linear regression model. That's your equation. So the equation to the linear regression model, I don't know if you guys remember this, probably not. It's been a while. According to Megan, this was back in like October. So this was y hat equals b0 plus b1 times the x variable, okay? But the y hat and the x, you want to put them in context. So one of them you put as first, the other one you put as second. You just have to figure out which one is the x, which one is the y. And then for the B0 and the B1, you can find them on the table. You do not need any calculations. Some people for like throughout the day, they've been looking at their notes and they saw like one of the videos where it did all the calculations. You are not doing the calculations. If you want to go back and rewatch the videos on the calendar, you need to be watching the one that says like computer output. Reading the computer output. So like if you go to the let me go to the stats on the classwork tab. If you go to the unit 3 assignment calendar, sorry, unit 3, this is taking a while to load for whatever reason. People were looking at the linear regression video. You don't want to look at the linear regression video. You want to read this one or watch this video. Reading computer output for linear regression. The one for November 9th through the 10th. I don't know what I'm doing. November 9th through the 10th. Oh my god, this thing is like slow today. It's loading. The November 9th through the 10th, that video where it says reading regression output, that will show you where to find the slope and the y-intercept in the table, okay? So from this table, you basically only need like 3 values for the linear regression model. Out of all of those numbers, you only need like 3 from that table, okay? Then in part D, it says to explain in context what the slope is. So the slope is the B1 value. So you have to use the sentence frame to explain the slope in context, and make sure you have units. So what are my units for this example? Is it inches? Is it centimeters, pounds, kilos? Like, what are the units in this example? If we're talking about birth weights, pounds, right? So when you explain for D and E, you need to mention the word pounds because that's the units, okay? And then in part E, you're explaining in context what the y-intercept is. So the y-intercept is the B0. Use the sentence frame to talk about the slope and the y-intercept. So again, the sentence frames, if you go all the way at the bottom of the classwork tab, under important class info, you can find right here AP Stats sentence frames. And that's where the slope and the y-intercept sentence frames are, okay? Then on the back side, it says to calculate the correlation between the first child and the second child. Does anybody remember what correlation, what variable that is? R. It's R, good. So correlation is R. So if you look back at the table, there is something on this table that will help you solve for R. You just have to figure out what that is. So in part F, it says calculate, because that one you have to actually do something to calculate R, okay? And then in part G, it says, suppose the doctor is getting ready to deliver the second child of a mother whose first child weighed 7.2 pounds. And you're supposed to predict the birth weight of the second child. So for this one, you need to go back and plug in to part C. Whatever linear regression model you got for part C, that's where you plug in for G. And then the last one is according to the residual plot. What can you say about the appropriateness of the linear model? So remember, if it's appropriate, there's no clear pattern. If there's no clear pattern in the residual plot, then it is appropriate. However, if you see a pattern, and I'll talk about the patterns, let's say for the patterns, it can either be like fanning outwards, so something scattered but it looks like it's fanning outwards, or something that's like fanning inwards. Those are patterns, so you say it's not appropriate. And then the other one is like if it curves kind of like a parabola. It's very obvious that it kind of looks like a parabola. Those are the curves, so then those are not appropriate, okay? All right, and then that's the end of the worksheet. So that should give you enough information to do the worksheet now. Remember, this is a group thing. I want you guys talking to each other. For some reason, I don't know if people still don't know each other very well. I don't know, but like first and fourth period, they like tend to do stuff alone, and that defeats the whole purpose of this class. The whole purpose of this class is for you guys to work together. That's why I have you guys sitting in groups, okay? So please do not be doing this individually. Do step by step together. Don't move on, like wait for people, okay? All right, let's do this.